Alright, what do we have that's fun? Well, we have a lot of fun cards. What do we have that's good? There is an Ulamog in the pack. There's a Bolas Citadel in the pack. I wonder if you can build around that. There's a Llanowar Elf in the pack, which is probably one of the stronger green cards. But as far as power level for limited goes, Sword of Body and Mind feels like it's just... like, Sword of Body and Mind is busted in half, right? Its base... Is it the strongest card in this cube? I'd be willing to believe it's the strongest card in the cube individually. I have taken Sword of Body and Mind in Vintage Cube highly, and Vintage Cube this is not. This is sort of like Vintage Cube on Arena, but it's not powered, so it's more like a Arena-only version of Legacy Cube. I have a tough time believing Llanowar Elves is correct to take over Sword of Body and Mind. This card gives a creature Infect 5. 2 hits with Sword of Body and Mind kills your opponent in Limited. It's really busted because all it asks you to do is play creatures. And not even like special creatures, just play creatures. And then occasionally you'll play against a blue-green deck and instantly beat them. Like happened to us yesterday when we played blue-green. I feel like the existence of Sword and Body and Mind actively makes me want to try very hard not to be in blue-green. Which feels weird, but like the format is so underpowered, I feel, compared to Sword of Body and Mind, that I would expect a lot of good decks to have Body and Mind taken very highly. And very, very few decks that ever pick Sword of Body and Mind have it in the sideboard. Unless they somehow don't have creatures, they're gonna play it. And with that said, what options do we have in this pack that actually synergize with it? We could play Starnheim Unleashed, or we could play Baral's Expertise. There aren't actually a lot of excellent cards in the pack. Uro is, I don't know that Oko is. I kind of suspect it isn't. I'm going to take Starnheim Unleashed because I think it's probably the individually most powerful card in that pack. And I don't want to take a double-colored card. That leads me into taking white cards, although there aren't excellent white cards here. Dorad is probably the best card with Sword of Body and Mind. Anything that can fly or otherwise be evasive is nice. I should probably take Ambitious Farmhand. I think that's stronger than Selfless Savior. And I think I really want to just play creatures with Sword of Body and Mind, rather than trying to go for any of these rampy strategies. What is Outlast? Outlast is a mechanic from Khans of Tarkir. A creature with Outlast can, as a sorcery, pay the Outlast cost and tap itself to put a +1/+1 counter on it. And it can do that as many times as it wants, except this Acolyte card has a weird thing where it gives your other creatures that don't have +1/+1 counters Outlast. So basically it lets your other creatures Outlast once, but it itself can Outlast every single turn if it wants to. Suddenly, no creatures in white. So I could take Grim Lavamancer, which I'm not super excited about. I could take Kabira Takedown, which isn't awful, but I don't think dramatically improves the deck. I'm willing to take Sundown Pass here. I think that I want to experiment with drafting lands much more highly, even if it's just speculation on colors that I'm not in. Because other than Magma Opus, there's nothing that's like actively good in this pack, or Grim Lavamancer, but I don't want to speculate pick Grim Lavamancer. So maybe we're not going to use this Sundown Path, but if we do wind up using it, then I think it's just very nice to already have. And the opportunity cost here is pretty low. So we could take Maul of Skyclaves, which is okay with Sword of Body and Mind, because it's a way to give a creature flying, which is nice, but it isn't a thing that holds Sword on its own. We could also just take Rampaging Ferocidon, because that's a good card, and try to go into Boros. It's safer than trying to force mono white. Maul is the safer pick because we're more likely to end up in a deck with white than we are to end up in a deck with red-white, but I think Sword of Body and Mind really makes me just want to make sure that I have creatures. Ooh. Okay, Stonecoil Serpent and Elite Spellbinder are both really good. I think normally I would tend to take Stonecoil Serpent, but in this case, I think having Sword of Body and Mind makes me value the flyer. Just anything that's aggressive I'm really happy with. Here, Legion's Landing works. Yeah. We need 1-drops. We do. For the same reason, I'm happy to take Isamaru. One of these days I'm going to draft Primal Command. Because I really hope it lets you submit the alternate art version for Primal Command. I haven't had the ability to use that in any constructed decks yet. I should probably figure out some historic deck to play that's like green, red, some kind of Naya, maybe 4-color land destruction deck. It'd be fun. Okay, so if we wanted to abandon red and go into blue-white tempo, Brawl's Expertise, if you get to 5 mana, is a pretty powerful way to just remove all of your opponent's blockers and play stuff out on curve. But considering all of our creatures are already built to support Sword of Body and Mind, I think they support Bone Splitter relatively well. Selfless Savior Willing is a really decent sign. It's not the ultimate white aggressive card, but it is a good white aggressive card. Take Grim Lavamancer. Take Grim Initiate, although I hope we don't have to play it. Take Platinum Angel, I guess. Alright, so red-white looked relatively open, and we're doing a good job of supporting our Sword of Body and Mind, which makes me happy. NX is not good in a 2-color list. Scrapheap Scrounger is not exciting because we're not playing black. None of the other cards are remotely useful for our deck. We could play Sarkhan. I guess that's like sort of decent aggressive top end, but not great. I'm almost tempted to play Scrapheap Scrounger over Sarkhan. Just try to keep the curve low. Elish Norn is definitely a bomb, but it's also a bomb we definitely can't cast. We're probably going to try to be a 16-land deck. I think I take the Scrapheap Scrounger and maybe we pick up some free black fixing, but mostly I hope that we just don't play it. There is a chance that we end up playing Sarkhan if I take it, but I don't even think that Sarkhan would be excellent in our deck. I think the maximum upside on Scrapheap Scrounger is probably slightly higher. Here, we have Showdown of the Scalds, Intrepid Adversary, Sarah the Benevolent, who just comes down and makes a 4/4 flyer with Vigilance. Ketra's Monument. There's a lot of good cards here. Chase's Tutelage and Crab. We are a mill deck. We weren't punished. We took Sword of Body and Mind as a mill card. It's just a better mill card than Chase's Tutelage. I think we are currently a better mill deck than if we had both of those cards. As tempting as it is to take Showdown of the Scalds, I think I'm supposed to take Sarah the Benevolent. 4/4 flyer for 4 with Vigilance is just very, very good. I think I'm happy to take Den of the Bugbear. We may or may not end up in white, but if we end up in white, I'm not terribly excited about Banishing Light, and if we end up in red-white, then I'm very excited about Den of the Bugbear. How many ways to trigger Helia do we have? It's not a combo with Rampaging Ferocidon. We have Ambitious Farmhand and Legion's Landing. So that's a no for Heliod. Sky Sovereign isn't a terrible magic card, but it's also not the most impressive magic card. I kind of just want to take the 2-drop flyer, given that we already have Bone Splitter and Sword of Body and Mind. I don't like Blightstep Pathway as the fixer, because we don't want to play it on the black side. We would prefer any black fixers we pick up to be dual lands that make both colors naturally. Valorous Stance is good, and so is Weaponize the Monsters, but I'm pretty sure I'm just happier picking up a dual land at this point. I don't think we're going to be lacking for playables. Basri's Lieutenant is a pretty strong card. Do we have any other cards that naturally get counters? No. But Unbreakable Formation has been very good in the past, and we have a lot of 1 and 2 drops. I think I'd rather have the Unbreakable Formation than the Basri's Lieutenant here, and I don't think Charming Prince is a good enough aggressive card to be worth considering. If you can get to playables, mono white seems stronger here. Maybe. I do view Den of the Bugbear as probably the best payoff for being 2-color right now. Ooh. Wow, there's just literally nothing in this pack for us. I super don't want to take a Lightning Axe. But there's literally nothing else in the pack for us, so we're just gonna pretend that pack didn't exist. Ooh. Is Lorehold Command interesting? Lorehold Command's pretty interesting. I don't want to have to play a 5-drop top end. I do like Dauntless Bodyguard. It's not the best in the world, but it is good. I think I'd rather not play a 5-drop if I can help it. Nothing playable in this pack. I don't really want to play Kazul's Fury, but there is a world in which we play it as like a 17th land if we end up short on playables, which I don't think can possibly happen. I don't like playing Cast Out as removal spell. It's too expensive, and cycling it takes time. Oketra's Monument... Our 4-drops not being discountable is kind of awkward, but I'm pretty sure Oketra's Monument is usually just fairly solid. It's possible we don't end up playing it, but I suspect we probably end up playing it more often than not. There's like no chance we play Helm of the Host, right? I'm just gonna take the land that keeps people off of white cards. Blightstep Pathway is technically an improvement over a mountain, so we will take it because it can activate the Scrappy Scrounger. Considering the opportunity cost there was a Heliod that I don't think is particularly playable for us, I'm not too stressed about that. There are a lot of very good cards with Helm of the Host. I don't think there are any, like, super buff win the game instantly combos. But it doesn't take a lot for Helm of the Host to be good and limited if you're going over the top. I wish I could take a Time Warp, but I don't think we can take a Time Warp. Between Conclave Tribunal and a Braid, I'd rather have a Braid. Captivating Crew is interesting, but probably not where we want to go. It's a little expensive. I mean, I could use more expensive cards, but I don't think I prefer it over a Braid or Thraben Inspector. And between the two of them, I think I prefer Thraben Inspector. That's a little close, but yeah. Welcoming Vampire and Reckless Stormseeker, huh? There's also Chandra Torch of Defiance. Welcoming Vampire is decent. We have a lot of ways to trigger it, but it's also not the most aggressive creature in the world, and when we don't have Sword of Body in mind, we would prefer to be aggressive. Reckless Stormseeker is very aggressive. I guess Sarah does reward us for just having creatures with flying, and so does Sword of Body in mind. Okay, I think I'll take Welcoming Vampire over Reckless Stormseeker. I'm not completely convinced that's correct, but I'm willing to give it a shot. Between Thundering Rebuke and Empress Shieldbreaker, Wait, what card did I take over with... What card did I take Thraben Inspector over? Was that a Lightning Strike? Or was it Scorching Dragon? No, it was a Braid, wasn't it? Okay, I was going to say, wait, did I take that over Lightning Strike? That's not right. Lightning Strike can go face, but taking it over a Braid is maybe right, or at least more defensible. Between Pride of the Conquerors and Embereth Shieldbreaker, I think I'd rather have Embereth Shieldbreaker. More creatures on curve. Thundering Rebuke is interesting to consider, but I don't think is quite there. Battlecry Goblin versus Magda. Battlecry Goblin has haste as a 4-drop. And makes more goblins. Versus Magda is just an accelerator when you attack. That's kind of tricky. This is a little bit close. I think I barely prefer the Battlecry Goblin here. Rekindling Phoenix, I think, is an appropriate 4-drop for this list. We've got 2 red-white dual lands already. I don't think we're, like, terribly concerned about our ability to play a double red card. Oh, now here's a pack with tough calls. Heroic Reinforcements is a bonkers magic card if limited draft tells me anything. Esper Sentinel is good, but we're kind of already stuffed on 1-drops. And there's a Godless Shrine that improves our Scrap Heap Scrounger. But I think it's probably supposed to be Heroic Reinforcements. And we pick up a Ranger of Eos, which definitely rounds out our top end. Alseid, probably preferable to Grim Initiate. Needleverge Pathway, super happy to pick up. Let's see. What are the chances that Bloodbraid Marauder is good in our deck? Versus Ministrant of Obligation makes flyers. I think Ministrant is more likely to make it, but I also suspect it probably doesn't make it. Pride of the Conquerors is playable, but probably not going to be played. I feel like creatures that play well against sweepers have a lot of value in this format. I would agree with that. I was impressed with Ministrant of Obligation last time that we played it. It felt like the control decks I have seen tend to rely on sweepers and low-cost removal as ways to... Wow, that's a late Kolagon's command. As ways to beat aggro decks, and Ministrant does dodge most of those that aren't exile. Shieldbreaker will be a great sideboard option. I believe we're playing best of 1, so not as good as we would like, but possibly still good. Now, the fact that we did end up picking up the Ranger of Eos makes me kind of disappointed that I don't have giant... I don't really have too many good 1-drops at all, other than Alseid, Selfless Savior, and Thraben Inspector. Oh, you know what? Fetching Grim Lavamancer actually is pretty solid at that point in the game. I shouldn't complain about that. But not having Giant Killer or the Stonecoil Serpent, those were the all-stars last time. Okay, how many? It gave me 17 lands. I don't believe I want 17 lands. I think I want 16. If we cut a mountain, we have 5, 9 red sources, and 10 white sources. Is that the way this works out? 10 white, 5, 9. Yes. That sounds probably about correct. 5, 14, 16. Yes. So we need 4 cuts. I'm super happy cutting Grim Initiate. I'm probably happy cutting Pride of the Conquerors. I think I'm happy cutting Ministrant of Obligation. I could be okay cutting a 4-drop. Of those, Starnheim Unleashed is probably the most cuttable. I don't think I would ever cut Sarah before Starnheim Unleashed, because they are, for the most part, the same card. Starnheim Unleashed does get better if you foretell it, which we're very unlikely to do. I don't super want to cut Rekindling Phoenix because I think that it's probably better than Starnheim Unleashed. The double red is a consideration, but our mana base doesn't have too much trouble supporting that. But Sarah essentially makes the same Flying Vigilance Angel token and gives you the ability to uptick on future turns, which with our other flyers is pretty valuable. Unleashed is kind of more like a 5-drop, but I would caution that the more you have a low curve, the less Starnheim Unleashed is a 5-drop, because the less easily you can afford to foretell it on turn 2. Our deck's really aggressive. We probably want to be playing a 2-drop on turn 2, and that means the opportunity cost of casting a Foretold Unleashed is a lot higher, and therefore we are much more likely to just play a 4-drop Starnheim Unleashed for curve reasons. And at that point, I think Sarah's better. Unleashed is definitely more of a 5-drop in a slightly slower mid-range list that's trying to play a bunch of 2-for-1s and doesn't have as many ways to use its mana on turn 2. I suspect I probably want to cut a 1-drop, I just don't know what 1-drop to cut. Or rather, I guess, do I have any 1-drop that's worse than Embereth Shieldbreaker? Because for the same reason that Starnheim Unleashed isn't really a foretell card, Battle Display also is something that a lot of the time I'm not going to get any use out of. I think Shieldbreaker is probably the most reasonable cut here. Of the things that are remaining, am I happy with Oketra's Monument? And if I wasn't, what would I bring in? The Ministrant of Obligation, probably? Do we prefer Ministrant of Obligation, or Pride of the Conquerors, or Shieldbreaker to Oketra's Monument? Or, you know what, heck, even the Grim Initiate. I guess it is decent with Bone Splitter and Sword of Body and Mind. How do we feel about Oketra's Monument? We are definitely a very go-wide deck. That is true, which makes Pride of the Conquerors interesting, but cutting Oketra's Monument for Pride of the Conquerors is a awkward feeling cut. My concern with Oketra's Monument is that 3 of our 4-drops we want to be playing immediately after it don't benefit from it, and Rekindling Phoenix does get a 1/1, but no cost reduction. We have 3 3-drops, and we have 6 cards, basically. I guess Ranger of Eos is 1, too. So we have currently 7 cards that benefit from Oketra's Monument. If I was mono-white, I'd be happier. Scrap Heap, Battle Cry, Rampaging Ferocidon, and Rekindling Phoenix, all not benefiting Hertz. Heroic Reinforcements is definitely a better overrun, and so is Unbreakable Formation. The question is, do we just want Pride of the Conquerors because it's one more overrun, even if it isn't the best overrun? I don't have a direct answer to that. But I am coming more around on the idea that this is probably not quite an Oketra's Monument deck, and that Ministrant of Obligation is probably better. Yeah, I think Unbreakable Formation and Heroic Reinforcements are our 2 overrun effects that are both better than Pride of the Conquerors. And I think the next card I would consider cutting would probably be Starnheim Unleashed, and I think that's still better than Pride of the Conquerors. or some one drop. I have a tough time evaluating whether we have too many one drops or not here. It's not easy for me to decide, but Bone Splitter definitely makes me happy with lots of one drops, so I think this is what we're going to call it. Yeah, I think so.